What's up guys, it's me again, Wolfwood, and I'm back with new builds. And I want to share them with you guys before the new DLC comes out in a few days. But before we start, just a quick disclaimer for those who are new on my channel. Basically, I make unorthodox builds, and the builds you'll see on my channel are not usually meta. I just love making builds, and I'm just sharing them with you guys. Alright, so without any delay, let's check on the build. Alright, so I call this the heavy weapon melee tank build. So basically it is what it is. It's a tank melee build, but instead of using a melee weapon, we'll be using the engineer's heavy weapon for melee attacks instead. So for our archetypes, we'll be using engineer for our primary, then challenger for our secondary. And we're going to use the flamethrower since we need to inflict fire damage, which will be explained later, and Juggernaut for increased melee speed and melee damage. Okay, so for our amulet, we're going to use the Whispering Marble. This gives us 3 stacks of bulwark and damage bonus. Generating band, so we can heal 3% of max health whenever our shield is active. Ring of Grace, so we can heal 15% of maximum health for 10 seconds whenever we take enemy damage. And Ring of Ordnance, so this basically grants us infinite ammo with our flamethrower, and since we will be using the flamethrower 100% of the time, this is very essential to the build. And lastly, you have the Black Spinal. This grants us healing 2% max health per second when we apply status effect damage. And that's also the reason why we're using the flamethrower, so we can heal constantly. So for our armor, we'll be wearing the full Leto Mark 1 set, the heaviest and tankiest armor. So we need all the armor we can get, and you don't have to worry about the weight since we're carrying the flamethrower all the time. We can dodge normally despite of our weight being too heavy. And for our relic, Tranquil Heart is the best option. So basically the passive health regen from this relic is what we need. We're going to equip melee damage, healing effectiveness, and damage reduction for our relic fragments. So for our long gun and handgun, it doesn't really matter what you equip since we won't be using them anyway. But for our melee weapon, you will need the Wrathbringer for this build. The reason why is because the melee attacks from the heavy weapon counts as a melee damage. And there are some melee weapons and few melee mutators that works with the heavy weapon melee damage. And I just learned that the awakening passive skill from the Wrathbringer works on the heavy weapon melee attacks. So this means if you get damage 10 times, your heavy melee weapon attack is increased by 50%. And if you compare the damage of the Wrathbringer versus the flamethrower actually deals more damage. So let me show you. So here I'm using the heavy weapon, and I'm going to do a melee damage. So the base damage is like 842, and if I use the Wrathbringer, the base damage is like 473. Now we're going to inflict bleed to ourselves so we can activate the awakening passive skill. So the base damage for the Wrathbringer, as you can see, is 624. But if you use the heavy weapon, you see that it's like 1112 damage. And that's a lot. And lastly, I almost forgot, we're going to use the shielded strike for our melee weapon mutator. This will grant us shield whenever we deal melee damage, and this will proc the generating band ring passive. This grants us healing whenever our shield is active. Also, do not forget to drink the bark extract concoction. This increases your armor by 30, lasts 16 minutes, and this will bring your armor up to 316.2 and total damage reduction of 79.9%, which is really good since the maximum limit is 80%. And lastly, these are my traits. Alright, so before we end the video, I just want to give some pros and cons regarding the build. So starting off with the pros, this build is really tanky. This can survive Apocalypse. It's been tried and tested. It has high survivability against mobs. It can slay elites and aberrations. It can also be used against some bosses. Now the cons, however, it has a very short range, very slow, and it's not really ideal against flying bosses, and may not be for everyone. But overall, in my opinion, this build is fun to use. It's refreshing and weird, but in a good way. Alright, so that's our build for today. I hope you like it. For those who are new, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. And this will very much help me in my channel. Alright, till next time, and have a good one.